My wedding was held under sparkling lights, and everything seemed perfect. Then came the moment my mother-in-law, Evelyn, and my husband, Daniel, danced to the song meant for a mother and son. Evelyn leaned close to Daniel's ear and whispered, "No matter what happens, I'll always be the first in your heart, not her." Daniel smiled, then nodded instinctively, as if it were a familiar reflex. I sat there, frozen, but I had prepared myself thoroughly for this exact moment. I stepped up to the stage, took the microphone, and asked, "Is anyone curious to see the special wedding gift my groom and his mother have prepared for me?" We held the wedding at an old mansion in Charleston, South Carolina, with weathered bricks, large glass windows glowing with warm golden light, like a scene from a fairy tale. The surroundings truly felt dreamlike, classic European architecture with ivory-painted walls, arched doorways, and hand-painted murals, all blending with the serenity of the lush garden outside. From the towering old trees casting cool shade to the soft, manicured lawns, everything came together to create the perfect space I had imagined for so long. Daniel and I had been together for 5 years, not a long time, but enough for me to see that he was the man I wanted to spend my life with. He always had a way of making me feel special, surprise gifts, candlelit evenings, tender promises. He was always thoughtful in every gesture, always creating romantic moments that made me feel like the happiest woman on earth. Everything seemed so perfect. Yet deep down, a vague sense of unease always lingered whenever I thought about the relationship between Daniel and his mother, Evelyn. Since we decided to get married, I had felt her presence in every aspect of our lives. Nothing was truly private between Daniel and me. Every decision was influenced by her. Evelyn was present at every family meeting, from choosing the wedding menu to deciding the honeymoon destination. Every time we planned something, she was there with an indescribable expression and always made it clear she wanted to intervene. My mother-in-law, Evelyn, wasn't just an overly affectionate mother. She constantly sought to maintain control over everything, including Daniel's romantic life. I could see this clearly whenever we discussed major life decisions. Every time Daniel and I made a choice, she would find some reason to interfere, even over something trivial like which dishes must be served or where we should go for our honeymoon so she could feel comfortable too. She spoke as if she were the ultimate decision maker in Daniel's life, and that made me feel like a stranger in my own world. She never directly opposed me, but the way she made vague comments, or even just a look, was enough to make me feel like I could never do anything right. One time, we were choosing the wedding menu. I picked dishes I thought would suit the guests, but Evelyn insisted we add a few items she considered must-haves at every family party. No matter how I tried to explain, she simply shook her head and smiled, but that smile carried no support for me at all. And once, when I decided to change our honeymoon plans, Evelyn showed up like an unexpected gust of wind. She called Daniel while we were discussing a romantic getaway, saying she needed him immediately, even though it was something trivial. Daniel, though reluctant, still couldn't say no to his mother. I stood there, trying to stay calm, but inside, frustration was rising. I could only stay silent as she stepped into our lives as if everything belonged to her. My mother-in-law always exercised a subtle control, not just through words, but through how she treated me. Every time she talked about caring for her son, I felt like I meant nothing in her eyes. One evening, after I had cooked dinner for the whole family myself, Evelyn made a sarcastic remark that my food couldn't compare to hers. Even though I had poured so much effort into it, I could only smile, but the feeling left a scratch in my heart. I tried to understand and accept all that, but deep down, I couldn't find peace. Her words, her contemptuous or critical looks, even if indirect, always made me feel like I would never be good enough. She was always there, silently taking over our moments. The more I tried to become part of this family, the more I felt pushed away. Daniel seemed unaware of the tension. He still acted loving and caring, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he always prioritized his mother over me. Every time I tried to confront the situation, Daniel would look at me with innocent eyes, as if he didn't understand the problem. And I realized that perhaps the strange bond between him and his mother, though deeply affectionate, was exactly what was holding our relationship back. And during our wedding reception, when the DJ invited the mother and son to step onto the dance floor, I felt like I was burning from the inside out. All the sounds in the room suddenly faded away, leaving only the faint echo of music coming through the speakers. The crowd began to clap and cheer, but I couldn't hear anything beyond the pounding of my own heart, echoing in my chest. Every eye was on them, but I couldn't look at anyone except Daniel and Evelyn. The guests around me were probably watching the mother and son in admiration, but all I felt was lost, left behind. Evelyn and Daniel stepped into the center of the dance floor, gently spinning to the rhythm of the music, their faces glowing with happiness and contentment. I could see the pride in Evelyn's eyes, as if she alone had the right to claim her son. She leaned into Daniel's ear and whispered something I couldn't hear, but just looking at his face, I knew it wasn't anything good. Daniel grinned, a smile I once believed was reserved for me, now given to her, his mother. His eyes, though seemingly joyful, lacked something, the tenderness I had always hoped for. He nodded in response to her, with a submissiveness I could no longer ignore. The feeling that surged inside me at that moment was indescribable. That look, the way he looked at his mother, was like a blade slicing deep into my heart. All the respect, all the trust I had given him over the years now felt like a shattered wall. I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't sit there silently watching the scene for another second. I stood up abruptly, walking quickly toward them, not caring about the shocked stares from those around me. My footsteps echoed, breaking the tense silence like shattering a mirror I had long tried to hide behind. They didn't know what I was doing, but I knew I had to do this. I had to face the truth. As I approached them, Evelyn looked at me without hesitation, not even the slightest surprise, only a cold gaze, as if she had already predicted this moment. And she spoke again, repeating the same words, the words I had heard countless times in my mind, but had never dared to confront. Daniel will always be mine first. You're just someone who came later. Every word she said pierced my heart like a dagger. These weren't words I was hearing for the first time, but hearing them spoken aloud today tore apart every hope I had nurtured. Everything I had longed for, everything I had fought for all these years, now seemed like a broken dream. Daniel stood beside her, saying nothing, not moving, just silent. He didn't resist, didn't speak up for me, didn't show even the slightest gesture that I was still the most important person in his life. He simply stood there, nodding slightly, with an expression I couldn't read. That nod wasn't just an acknowledgement that his mother was number one. It was a surrender of everything I thought we had. He didn't deny it. He didn't refute her words. And that made me feel as if I didn't exist in his heart at all. I stood there, my eyes fixed on him, and the bitterness rose within me. Everything I thought I understood about our love now felt like a fragile veil ripped apart. But I wouldn't allow myself to be weak. I couldn't let this weakness win. I had to face the truth. I had prepared everything for this moment. There was nothing left to fear. Looking into Evelyn's eyes, I gave a slight smile, but there was no peace in my heart. I stepped onto the stage, turned to the guests, and signaled the technician to play the video. From this point forward, only the truth remained. No more hiding. Is anyone curious to see the special wedding gift my groom and his mother have given me? I asked, my voice calm but carrying a strength and decisiveness I had never shown before. I stood in the center of the reception hall, microphone in hand, feeling each step sink into a space thick with tension. Every eye in the room was now on me, as if they were all waiting for something. At this point, I no longer cared about the whispers or curious glances. It was just me and the secrets I had held onto for so long. I signaled the technician to project the screen, and in that moment, everything around me seemed to stop. The screen lit up, revealing vivid footage of a story I never imagined would be exposed on the very day of my own wedding. The first clip appeared, footage from Evelyn's kitchen, a space I had once thought of as the place for warm family meals, now turned into a container of dark secrets. The scene began from the angle of a hidden camera, where Evelyn stood beside the stovetop, the warm yellow light from the chandelier above casting shadows across her face, highlighting her sharp and commanding features. She looked at Daniel, her voice low and slightly threatening, making me feel the control she always exerted over him. After the wedding, everything will change. I don't like that. She spoke as if my marriage to Daniel was a threat, something unacceptable. At that moment, I felt as if I were imprisoned in my own life, not by the bonds of marriage, but by a mother who believed she had the right to decide everything in her son's life. Her words were not just a gentle warning, they were a firm declaration of the unshakable power she had built over the years. Daniel stood next to her, his eyes seeming to search for reassurance in her words. He didn't respond immediately, just lowered his head, as if reflecting on her statement. Then, finally, he sighed and said, "You're my priority, always have been." His answer hit me like a bucket of cold water. He wasn't just echoing his mother's words. He was affirming that she was the most important person in his life, even as I stood right there in front of him, his bride-to-be. Those words felt like a dagger in my heart, and I couldn't stop the feeling that everything I once believed about his love had just crumbled. Evelyn, seemingly oblivious to the tension in the air, continued, her voice dripping with dominance and disdain. "I raised you to be who you are. She doesn't understand you at all." Those words painted a clear picture of her suffocating hold over Daniel. His mother, who saw herself as the only one entitled to truly know him, the only one who could care for him, while I, his future wife, was just a woman who came later. Every word she spoke was like a slap to my face, as if I was never good enough in her eyes, as if I could never replace her in Daniel's life. Daniel nodded, forcing a smile, but he couldn't hide the resignation in his eyes. That nod wasn't just agreement with his mother, it was a surrender of his own autonomy. He looked at me once, but it was a fleeting glance, like an unspoken apology. But I knew that look wasn't for me. It was for her, to keep her from feeling betrayed. The banquet hall fell completely silent. I could hear every breath I took, as if the entire room had shrunk. The feeling was indescribable, like chaos tangled up in my chest. The guests around me began to whisper, but no one dared speak up. They didn't dare interrupt this confrontation, this story I was telling, one I had poured my entire heart into. But I didn't stop. I had prepared too long for this moment to back down now. I was ready to expose it all, because this wasn't just about a wedding, it was about the truth I had endured. I took one step closer to the screen, signaling the technician to play the next video. At this point, my heart was no longer anxious, only strangely calm. The screen lit up once more, this time showing a hotel room. Daniel wasn't alone. He was holding and kissing a woman, clearly not me. Not his mother. Another woman, someone I had never seen before. Daniel spoke softly in the room, his voice tender, not the voice he used with me. "She's safe. But you're the one who really understands me." His words confirmed the existence of a relationship I never knew about. She's safe. That phrase alone dismissed everything I had been in his life. And you're the one who really understands me. Those words drowned me in darkness. Was it me? Or was it this other woman he truly wanted? The feeling of betrayal seeped into every corner of my mind. The hall was dead silent. Not a sound, just wide-eyed stares locked onto the screen. The entire space seemed to freeze for a moment. But then, like a storm breaking loose, the murmurs began, whispers, gasps, stunned reactions crashing like waves. People started murmuring in disbelief at what they had just witnessed. Some couldn't hide their shock, while others expressed anger. Some stood up, looking at me as if I had just exposed a monumental crime. Daniel rushed forward, his face flushed, eyes full of worry and rage. He shouted at me, his voice burning with fury. "Are you insane?" Those words weren't just blame. They were a complete denial of everything I had done. He didn't just lash out with cruel words, he tried to erase what he had done. He thought he could wipe away the truth with a single sentence. But I was no longer the woman who would silently absorb the blame. Evelyn, unable to contain her fury, hissed through her teeth. "You petty little woman." That sentence wasn't just an insult. It was a brutal belittlement, a deeply painful attack. His mother, the woman who always placed herself at the center of everything, was now not only emotionally wounding me, but demeaning me to the lowest point possible. But I did not flinch. Her words no longer scared me. My rage had become my strength. I looked at them without a hint of fear, and in that moment, I felt no need to justify anything. I was ready. I remained calm without any rush and pressed play on the third video. A video I knew would end everything. There was nothing left to hide. What I was about to show was irreversible, an undeniable truth. The screen lit up again. The next images appeared clearly, this time, a small restaurant scene where dim lighting created a dark, mysterious atmosphere. Daniel and Evelyn were sitting across from each other, their closeness more intimate than ever, as if everything between them had already been decided. I watched them on the screen, and in that moment, I felt like an outsider pushed out, witnessing words and actions I never imagined possible. Evelyn, without hesitation, turned to Daniel with a calculating look in her eyes. Her voice was low and resonant in the quiet space of the restaurant. "She's stubborn, so you know what to do. She'll end up like your father," she continued without pause, without any sign of remorse. Her words weren't just cold. They carried a clear and terrifying implication. The death of Daniel's father, whom he had always believed died suddenly and naturally, was now exposed. Evelyn had implied that the death wasn't an accident, but something intentional, something she was involved in. The entire banquet hall erupted. Murmurs swept across the room like crashing waves. Whispers filled with doubt and horror appeared on every guest's face. I felt the shock flood the space. Not my own, for I had prepared for this moment, but theirs. The people around me seemed unable to believe what they had just seen. A guest suddenly stood up and shouted, face pale, finger pointing at Evelyn. "She just confessed to murder." That statement was like a stone thrown into a still pond, creating ripples that stirred up everything, making the truth too obvious to deny. The entire room filled with shock, outrage, and disbelief. Everyone turned to look at Evelyn, their eyes filled with disgust and suspicion. I stood firm, unmoved. I looked around the room, my gaze burning with cold determination, as if I were standing atop a summit no one could touch. I didn't speak at first, just let the silence stretch, allowing the truth to settle into the air. Then I asked, my voice steady, without a single tremble, "Would anyone like to explain this?" My words sliced through the space like a cold blade. Everyone in the room seemed to hold their breath. Their eyes shifted from me to Evelyn, then from Evelyn to Daniel. Each person in the room could feel that this wasn't just a broken marriage. It was the unraveling of long-buried, dark secrets. Evelyn, now surrounded by furious stares, could no longer maintain her usual composure. She screamed in fury, her voice shrill like an animal cornered. "You petty little woman." She no longer had the clarity to hide her emotions. Her anger and confusion were written all over her face. But I didn't back down. I stood there, watching her with an eerie calm, as if I had seized control of the entire room. Daniel, by now, was as pale as a corpse. His body trembled, unable to process what he had just witnessed. He walked toward me, but not to protect me, to demand an explanation. Yet his words couldn't fix anything now. He could only stand there, speechless, unable to defend his mother's actions. His eyes were full of confusion, as if he were standing at a crossroads with no idea which way to go. But it wasn't over. The story didn't end there. I still had one final card to play. The main door suddenly swung open, and in that moment, everything seemed to freeze. A man stepped inside Mr. Michael, Daniel's father, the man we had all believed to be dead for years. The entire hall fell into stunned silence. No one dared to breathe. No one dared to move. Those standing near the entrance glanced at one another, eyes wide open in disbelief. Evelyn, the one I had thought to be the mastermind behind it all, now stood frozen, her face pale, panic clearly written all over her. Michael, now instantly recognized by everyone in the room, entered with a firm stride and an expression of icy resolve. There wasn't a trace of softness in his face. He walked in silence, his eyes never leaving Evelyn, as if he were staring at someone he hadn't seen in years, someone he now knew had trapped his son in a web of lies. He spoke, his voice deep and commanding, echoing through the stunned stillness of the hall. "I didn't have enough evidence back then, but now I've come back to finish this. His words shattered the frozen tension in the room like a breaking sheet of ice. All eyes turned to him, as if they still couldn't comprehend that the man they believed to be dead was now standing there, in the flesh. And with a single sentence, he had dismantled the elaborate web of lies Evelyn had woven over the years. Evelyn now looked like a cornered animal. She collapsed, unable to remain standing. Her face turned deathly pale, her eyes wide in shock, and she couldn't utter a single word. Her expression was pure terror. She knew it was over. The secrets she had hidden for so long were now exposed under full light. The deceptions, the schemes, they were all laid bare in a single instant. She crumpled to the floor, too weak to rise again. Police officers appeared immediately, as if they had been waiting. One of them stepped forward, removing handcuffs from a black pouch, and without delay, Evelyn was taken into custody, unable to scream or resist. One officer grabbed her arm and pulled her up, while another cuffed her hands. The clicking sound of the cuffs was like a final period to the story. Everything she had done, everything she had hidden, was now inescapable. Daniel stood motionless, unmoving, silent. His face was pale, his body trembling, as if all strength had been drained from him. He looked at his mother, then at me, but he could do nothing. His eyes were empty, not the eyes of the strong man I once loved, but of someone shattered, someone who had lost everything. He had lost his wife, his mother, and now even his honor was stripped away. He couldn't deny what had happened. The secrets he and his mother had buried were now revealed. Everything he had built, everything he had believed in, had collapsed like a house crumbling before his eyes. As Evelyn was led away, the entire hall remained in silence. Then, amid the heavy quiet, I heard Daniel's voice. He stammered, lips trembling, as if trying to hold on to composure while everything crumbled around him. "Can we talk?" I didn't answer right away. I simply stood there, my eyes fixed on him. Every word he spoke, every gesture he made, felt like a plea, but there was no pity left in me. Over the past months, I had given him forgiveness, patience, unconditional love, but now I knew it had all been in vain. He hadn't just betrayed me, he had betrayed himself, choosing to live within a web of lies his mother had built. I looked at him for a moment longer, then smiled gently. It wasn't a smile of joy or satisfaction. It was a smile of release. A release from all the lies, the pressure, the concealed schemes. I walked away without looking back, without hesitation. Each step I took out of that wedding hall was steady and certain, like someone freeing herself from a burden she had carried for far too long. I was no longer someone's wife or somebody's daughter-in-law. I wasn't part of a family I had tried so hard to belong to, no longer someone who always had to put others before herself. I walked into the open air, a space free from judgmental eyes or controlling hands, a place where I could finally breathe freely. I returned to being myself, no longer manipulated, no longer bound by poisonous secrets or pretense. I was no longer the woman who lived under the shadow of others' expectations and control. I had let go of the man I once believed would be my lifelong partner, let go of the mother-in-law who ruled over everything. I no longer had to live in lies or betrayal. I had broken free from it all. And that was the greatest wedding gift I had ever received. A gift not from Daniel or Evelyn, but one I gave to myself. Liberation, freedom, and the right to reclaim my own life. This gift held no material value, no glitter or glamour, but it was the most important thing I could ever receive. It was the rebirth of myself. As I stepped outside and looked up at the vast night sky, I felt peace slowly return to my heart. I had made it through. Every step I took now was a step of freedom, no longer burdened by the weight of the past. I no longer had to worry about pleasing others or living up to an image someone else had created for me. I was me, and from this moment on, I would live for myself. In that moment, I knew I didn't need acceptance from anyone. The only acceptance I needed was my own. And I had found it.